So here I am in Unity, and I just wanted to show you our existing start screen before I go and make a new one. So that's not bad, but we're gonna make something even cooler. Whoa, where did that lisp come from? I think I need to drink some water. I'm one of the developers working on Dwerve. It's a tower defense dungeon crawler RPG, and right now you can play a free demo of it called Dwerve Prologue on Steam. Okay, so I'm going to go through this as if you're a noob in Unity. If you're already confused with my layout, I have a playlist that I'll have a link to in the description or whatever, and it shows you how to create a layout like this and why it's my favorite layout. So in the layout that you have, you should create a folder called Scenes. And in that folder, right click on it, go to Create, and we're going to create a scene. Wow, surprise, the Scenes folder is going to have a scene. There's this icon that Unity does, which is like the Unity icon, and it does that icon for scenes, which is kind of interesting that they decided to use the Unity icon for scenes. But anyway, we're going to name this one, I don't like main menu scene. That's what the previous one was called. I'm going to call it start screen. Okay, so double click that, and holy smokes! Did you see that? It switched. If you look here in the hierarchy, scenes update everything in the hierarchy. So you can think of a scene as almost a folder for, most commonly, a level of your game or a section of your game. Scenes contain the objects of your game. They can be used to create a main menu, individual levels. Think of each unique scene file as a unique level. In each scene, you will place your environments, obstacles, and decorations, essentially designing and building your game in pieces. Scenes contain the objects of your game. So why wouldn't you just make one scene be your entire game? Well, the reason is because the game would have to load all of the objects all at once. So it's better to separate your game into scenes, so that way when someone's playing the game, it only needs to load the objects in the current scene. For example, the current level. So if you make every level a different scene, then when the game loads a scene, it'll only load the objects for that level. That way, you can make your loading times a lot quicker. So the start screen can be a scene, and the objects that it would have is the UI for the start screen. If you haven't watched my previous video and you're so confused by my project here, you can change from one column to two columns. So if you have two columns set up, there's a little slider in the bottom, and this slider changes the size of your icons. But I don't really see a reason to have these giant icons like this. Be a pro and switch to one column. Look how much space it saves. If you want to know what scene you're in, just check the top of the hierarchy. You see how it says start screen? And this one says start screen, and then if I click main menu, the top says main menu. That's how you can check which scene you're in. The crazy thing is that you can take a scene and actually drag it into another scene. Okay, I know this is mind-blowing and this is going to be too crazy for this tutorial. So we're just going to Control Z, just Control Z. Okay, I can't Control Z that. Okay, so I'm just going to select it and hit delete. Delete. Why is it not removing it? That didn't work either. Okay, you have to right click and click remove scene. Oh my god, that was unnecessarily difficult. And now if I go back to main menu's fine. We didn't touch main menu. I just removed main menu from the start screen scene. Okay, let's get on with this tutorial. Two very important windows that show you what's in your scene is the scene window and the game window. Usually in Unity, when you open it up, they'll be like this or something like that. But I don't think they ever really need to be on the screen at the same time. If they do, I'll drag it out. The majority of the time, I prefer just having the scene or the game view. I have them tabbed so I can switch between the two. There's only a few things you need to know about the game view. The game view shows you basically what your game will look like when it's running. And here you have resolution settings. Just choose the resolution of your computer if you're making a PC game. If you're making a mobile game, you're going to end up clicking this plus and adding your own resolution. All right, but for now, we're just going to work in 1920 by 1080. You can also select 16:9 aspect ratio. That's the aspect ratio for 1920 by 1080. The scale here, you should always have this all of this slider all the way to the left. There's a lot of times where noobs are like, why is my game zoomed in? And their game's actually not zoomed in. They just happened to have this slider not all the way to the left. There's a pretty useful button up here called maximize on play. If you have this button selected, when you click the play button to run your game, it's going to enlarge that window so that you can get as big of a view of your game as possible. A cool little trick that I bet you don't know if you're a Unity noob is that normally when you pause the game and you unpause the game, it switches back and forth. You see that? The reason why when you pause the game it shrinks is usually because when you pause the game, you'll want to mess around with things in the hierarchy, with objects. And if the game is, enlarged like this, then you don't see the windows that would let you mess with that stuff. So a cool trick is that if you deselect maximize on play while the game is running and then you pause, when you unpause, look, the screen didn't go back to being large. Put that little tip in your pocket because it might become useful later. Okay, so I'm going to stop playing the game. As you can see, the blue highlight's gone when it's not playing. And then I'm going to go to the scene. The scene is where we're going to do all of the setup. And the hierarchy here is going to show us everything that's in the scene. If you can't find the gray box, for example, you can't see it, if you click on the main camera and you press the F key, while your mouse pointer is in the scene view, it'll automatically focus on the object you selected. Did you see how it centered it? I'll do it again. So I'm going to select the main camera, put the mouse inside the scene window, press F, and it focuses on that game object. So the camera is automatically added to a scene. And one of the quickest and easiest things that we can mess with is the background. So for example, I can select the color black here, and now the background will be black. And if I go to the game view now, you can see the background is black. And if I hit the play button, and even while the game is running, I can change the color of the background here. I'm going to go ahead and go with black for now. So let's stop running the game. If you get a good look at the hierarchy, when we press the play button, you can see that an object is created. An object called Don't Destroy on Load is created. Don't worry about this object and don't mess with this object. Another thing that you might notice is there's an asterisk next to start screen. The asterisk just means that you have changes in this scene that you have not saved. So watch this. I'm going to hit Control S to save the scene, or you can also go to File, Save. Now I'm going to switch from the start screen to the main menu scene. And watch this. When I switch back, the background's black. But if I make the background blue, you see the asterisk appeared, right? It means we didn't save the changes in this scene. Now if I go to the main menu screen, it'll ask me, hey, before you switch, do you want to save the changes? If I don't save the changes, and I click the don't save there, when I go back to the start screen, you can see the background is black. So it's important to consistently save the changes that you make in a scene. Just because you make a change in here doesn't mean it's going to save. And make sure that you click yes if you want to save the changes that you made in your scene. When you click on an object in the hierarchy, the information about that object is shown in the inspector. Make sure you memorize that. That's very, very important. Objects you click on, the information is shown in the inspector. Okay, so you ready to create your first game object ever? No coding required. This is built into Unity and it's pretty awesome. So you right click in the hierarchy and then create empty. This list is a list of a whole bunch of objects, and a lot of them have even several options. And they come with pre-made code and functionality, but since it's your first game object ever, click on create empty. And the default name for it is game object. We're going to call it game object 1. Another way to do it is at the top left here, there's a tab called Game Object. And if you click that Game Object tab, it's a list of game objects you can create. And the one that we created by right-clicking was Create Empty. So we're going to click the same thing, and ta-da, it's the same exact game object. And we can call this one Game Object 2. You definitely don't want game objects with the same name, because if you use this search here, if I type in Game Object, I want to know which game object I'm talking about. So make sure to name your game objects instead of just leaving them as game object. You can click on any game object and press the delete key to delete it, or you can right click and select delete to delete it. So now that we have one game object, let's go ahead and click it. Now whenever you click a game object, the inspector will show you information about that game object. Take a look. When we click on main camera, it has different information than when we click on this game object. This game object has very little information on it because remember, it's an empty game object, so it doesn't do much. The only information it actually has is just its position, rotation, and scale. And as you can see, these aren't zeros. If you click within one of these parameters, you can click 0, 0, 0. And now we moved this object to 0, 0, 0. I don't really see where that object is here. So a way to see an object is the object is invisible. It doesn't have any art on it. It's an invisible object, and games have tons of invisible objects. But if we want to work with this object and it's invisible and we don't see it, right here next to this cube, we can click this drop down menu, and here you can select ways to display it in the scene. So for example, I can click this yellow, and now there's a yellow oval with the name of my game object in it. See how it says game object 1? So I'm renaming this object to Ghost. And as you can see, it says Ghost right here. And there's nothing for me to see if I zoom in. If I click on the game view, you can see there is nothing there. The object is invisible. So it doesn't matter if you zoom in or zoom out. The only thing you're going to see is the title of that game object. Now, just because the game object is invisible doesn't mean that you can't move it. You can still move it. A way for you to move an object is to make sure that you're in the scene view and then press W. W will bring up these arrows. If you click on the arrows, you can drag the object around. But a quicker way to move objects around is to click this blue box. The blue box lets you drag the object. Now, if you look in the inspector, you can see there's an X, Y, and a Z, right? That's the X, Y, Z axis. And as I drag this object around, you can see those numbers are updating. So an interesting thing is that if you put in 0 and 0, it's actually the center of the screen. In some game engines, 0, 0 is the bottom left. In some game engines, 0, 0 is in the top left. In Unity, 0, 0 is actually in the center of the screen. Now you can also move the game object by changing the number in these values. So instead of this being 0, I can change it to 1, and you can see that it moved over. And if I click backspace and 2, 3, 4, you can see that it's moving over. Other than just typing in the number, you can also hover over the letter X, and you can see these two little arrows popped up. And if I click and hold, I can drag left and I can drag right, and it changes the value. So you can see my object now is going left and right. If I decrease the value on the Z axis, it'll move closer and further away from the camera, but we want to keep everything at 0 because we're not working in 3D for this. We don't need to. All the images are flat images, and if we want to make something bigger, we're going to scale it up, not move it closer. Now, in order for us to see this game object, we need to give it a sprite. So I'm going to click this Add Component button, and I'm going to search Sprite. So without you programming how graphics work, you can just add the code for it, and it's called Sprite Renderer. Make sure you select Sprite Renderer. If you pick the wrong one, all you have to do is right click and hit Remove Component. But let's go and add that Sprite Renderer component. So here you can see that the sprite is set to none. That means there is no sprite on this game object. Now if I click this little target icon, it'll show me all the sprites in my game project. And as you can see, there are a lot of sprites here in my game project. What you'll want to do is import your own sprite. So let me show you how to do that. Don't worry about all the folders that I have. When you're working on a game, you'll slowly build up a lot of folders. But basically what you want to do is inside of your assets folder, there'll be two folders that Unity will start with, and that's assets and packages. And inside your assets folder, open that up, and just like you created a scenes folder, also create a sprites folder. All you need to do is right click, click create, and then go to folder. That's how you create a new folder. When you are in the project, what you can do is you can click, for example, here I have Dwarf, the entire game. My game's called Dwarf. And here I have the entire folder of all the assets in Dwarf. And now if I right click on this and I create folder, it'll automatically get created within that folder. You see that? So you want to make sure that you have the correct folder selected when you're creating a new folder. Here I am on my desktop and I have a bunch of images. Just pick one and then drag it into Unity. Just click the image, pull it over, and you can pick exactly what folder you want to put it in. So another way to do it outside of Unity is to just save all your files into the project folder. So let me explain. When you create a Unity project, you create a folder somewhere on your computer. I recommend putting it in your documents. For example, in documents, I have a folder called game dev, and here I have a bunch of game dev stuff. You can see I have downhole here and I have Dwarf here. So let me click on Dwarf. Now when I click on Dwarf, these are all the files that are in my Unity project. And if I go to the assets folder, you can see that the assets folder is the same as this assets folder. Dum dum dum! The project window is actually just showing me the files in my project. That's what the project window is. Okay, so I made a folder and I put all the images I need for my start screen into that folder. You can see the images here. If I click through them in the inspector, it'll show you information about the images. And then the bottom right corner, let me make myself disappear. In the bottom right corner, there's a preview of the image. What you can do is you can drag that window up. Sometimes it's so small that you can't even see it. You can actually drag it all the way down and it'll disappear. So if you don't see, when you click your image in the project, if you don't see a preview of the image, just grab the bottom and pull it up. Okay, so if we click on the ghost game object, now what we can do is we can select the sprite from our project. However, it might be really difficult to select the sprite from your project, especially if you have this many sprites. So an easy way to also select the sprite is to just drag the sprite from the project. So here I can take the sprite from the project and I'm dragging it, and I'm dragging it into the sprite location. And I'm gonna let go. And look at that! The sprite is now on the ghost game object. And you can minimize and open up any component that is on a game object, right? So you might accidentally do this and be like, oh my god, the sprite render doesn't have information. And you're just a dummy and you minimized that component. So here we are. We got our sprite render, and there's a bunch of cool stuff you can mess with here. I'm not going to go into it because it's not really important for this tutorial. But you might have noticed that the image is effing huge. And if I click on the game window, you can see what it would look like, you know, in the game. A lot of people do this where they have both windows open. But I don't think you need to do that, because check it out. If I clicked the camera here. If I move the camera is now updating what the game sees, right? And there's a little preview here in the bottom that shows you, oh, hold on, I forgot to Bring myself back. That's important, right? My face has to be in the video. Your camera, make sure that your camera's at 0, 0. Like a lot of times when you create a game object, it doesn't get created at 0, 0. What I mean by that is, check it out. If I zoom in and move over here and I go to game object, create empty, look, the game object got created in the center of where I was looking. And look at these numbers. They're not 0, 0, 0. So whenever you create a game object, it's not going to get created at 0, 0, 0, and make sure that you're aware of that. It gets created wherever you are looking in the scene view, the center of the scene view. Anyway, I'm going to go and delete that game object. So let's go back to the ghost game object. And I want to show you something cool about this. We talked about the transformer and we talked about the sprite render, and we added this component. Well, there was an easier way, okay? Just like in math class where they show you the hard way and then an easy way, there was an easier way. You can right click, and then instead of creating an empty object and adding the sprite render component on it, you could have just gone to 2D object, sprite, and then picked one of these sprites. Just for fun, I'm gonna click square. And now we created a new game object, and the sprite is automatically set to square. By default, Unity comes with a couple of sprites so that it can do this kind of stuff for you. What decides what's in front and what's behind is the order in the layer inside the sprite render component. So look, both of these objects, the square and ghost, they have a sprite render, and they both have the number 0 here. You see that? But if on the square I change this number to 1, now that it's bigger than ghost's number, which is 0, it's on top. See how the square is now visible on top of that background? And just like you can put your mouse over these values and drag them around, you can also put your mouse over the order in the layer and drag this around. So the order in the layer is actually very important. You can also create several different layers. And since we're working in UI, I'm going to select the UI layer. Either Unity is going to by default have a UI layer, or you can create your own UI layer. Later on, you can do all sorts of cool stuff with layers, but we do not need to go into the depths of layers for this tutorial. Now that I changed the sorting layer to UI for the square, I should also change the sorting layer in the UI for the ghost. You want all of your objects to be on the same sorting layer. If you have some kind of weird problem while you're working on this, double check that all of your objects are on the same layer, and then check the order in that layer. I'm going to delete the square game object. I was just trying to make an example there. So for ghost, I'm going to rename this now. It's not funny as ghost anymore. I'm going to call it background 1. Oh, and let's call this one Vandra, because that's what this background is. This character here is Vandra the Troll Queen. This is one of the levels for Dwerve. And if I press the button 2, you can see it goes into 3D mode. Or you can, of course, press the 2D button at the top. I just wanted to show it to you guys because it's kind of cool to see it like this. So if your main camera is showing a black screen, for example here in game, we don't see our art. What happened to it, right? Let me show you how to fix that. What that usually means is that the camera is actually not able to see the artwork. And that is because the camera has a near and a far clipping plane. What that means is objects that are a certain distance away, they won't get rendered. And objects that are too close also won't get rendered. All we have to do is change a near clipping plane to 0 and check it out. All of a sudden, we can see that the camera can now see that artwork. I want to kind of show you guys the camera in the 3D view so you see what I'm talking about. If we go to the 3D view and I click on the camera, here's the camera, and it's right on top of the artwork. And now what you could do is you could move the camera back, and then you could have that clipping plane there. And if I mess with the clipping plane, you see that gray box moving? And watch, once I go past the artwork, you can see it goes black. So let's just change that back to 0. And for far, it doesn't matter. 1000 is fine. But basically, if we took this Vandra artwork and we move this artwork back, eventually, if I moved it really, really far back, 1000 is like really far. Let me change this to like 2. Oh, look, you can see it can't even see the artwork because now the artwork's too far. So for the distance, you want to make sure that all of your artwork is within the near and the far range. I think for 100 for the far range is fine. And now, other than putting the camera near, like I said, you can move the camera back. And when we move the camera back, if you look up at the Z-axis, you can see the Z-axis changing. So one of the ways to move the camera without going into 3D mode or whatever is just to move it on the Z-axis. But we're going to keep the camera at 0 because all we needed to do was change the clipping plane. You don't have to actually move stuff around in 3D for anything that we're doing here. As you can see, the background image is really big, right? So if I click on this object, which is now my image, you can see there's these little blue dots in the corners. And if I click on it, I can drag it. And you can change the size of this artwork, but we don't want to mess with that. We don't want to skew it. Now, there are a couple of very important shortcuts for moving stuff around. One is W, which, if you remember, it gives you all of the XY coordinates or whatever. And another one is E. E lets you rotate images. And the red axis, if I go to the 3D mode, you can see now that the red and the yellow axis represent Y, whatever, they represent Y, X, and Z. And, I mean, another way to rotate it is also just to change the values here. And that's probably how we're going to end up rotating it most of the time. And then the last thing here in the transform, let me close the sprite editor so you don't look at that and get overwhelmed. But if we look at the scale here, you can mess with the scale here as well. And the shortcut for that is R. So when I press R, you can see I have these indicators here. This one obviously is up and down. This one's gonna be left and right. And then if you click the white square in the middle and you drag, it scales it evenly. And that's how you want to scale stuff. You want to scale stuff evenly. The only problem with us scaling these images is that if we want everything to have the same scale, we have to make sure that, for example, I put 0.5, 0.5, 0.5 here, and then I got to make sure I do that for all my images. But let me show you some other ways that you can change the size of an image in your project. So what we can do is we can search for, if I open up this sprite editor, we can see that the artwork in here, we can click it, and then once I clicked it, it showed it to me in my project. You see that? It's like, here I am. And if you double click it, it'll even open up like this for you to look at. Anyway, so let's click on that. And here we can see there's a pixels per unit. And the pixels per unit is basically how many pixels you want in one grid size of Unity. If we change this number, check it out. If I go to 10 and I hit apply, you can see that the image is way bigger. But then if I go to 200 and I hit apply, the image is now way smaller. The thing is though, that you usually want to keep your pixels per unit the same for all your images throughout your project. And the pixels per unit is basically how many pixels you want in a grid space. And what I'm actually going to do is just change the camera. The camera has a size property. And if we change the size of the camera, you can see that as we change the size, it fits more into the screen. So all we need to do is just find a size that fits for us. Now, if people are going to have different resolutions on mobile and stuff like that, you'll want the background to probably be the same color. So what you can do is go over here to the background color in the camera. The camera decides the background color. I know it's a little weird, but whatever. And you can click the eyedropper tool, and now I can go to my piece of art, eyedrop that purple, and now look at that, it's seamless. And then I'm going to add more art in here before I start animating it. And all I need to do is duplicate this existing game object. By duplicating it, it's going to have the same properties, the same code on it. And there's a couple ways to do that. You can right click and hit copy and then paste. And then another thing that you can do is you can hit Control D on the keyboard. And as you can see, Unity is automatically adding numbers to the end of this to make sure that things aren't named the same thing. So for example, this right now for me would be background 2, and then this for me would be background 3. And for consistency, I think background 1 should be should have the order in the layer be 1. Number 2 should have the layer be 2, and number 3 should have the layer be 3. Because remember, they can't be on the same layer, or else you might see a flicker or some kind of weird issue. You want to have each piece of art on a different layer, and the higher the number, the more on top it'll be. Okay, so now once again, we can click the little target icon to pick the art that we want, but I think it's easier for me to just go and drag it in. So now I'm just duplicating the backgrounds, and I'm adding in the correct image. Oh, that's the crusher right there. Look at that, look at that. Yeah! I got a lot of layers for this. And now the last one, the foreground crowd. And look at that, man, that is cute, right? But as you can see, it doesn't all fit into the view. So what I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna animate it. I think I'll show Vandra and all that stuff. Another thing that you can do is you can animate the camera. So for example, the camera can start here and the camera can pan down. So we can move the objects or we can move the camera. I think I might do both just so that it looks kind of cool. So to animate stuff, what you need to do is use the Animator. And I am teaching so much in this tutorial. I totally forgot how much it is. So I made a new game object and I'm calling it Animator. And it doesn't matter where you put this because it's going to be invisible. But actually I would probably put it off to the side. So if I drag it off to the side, it's over there somewhere. And you could click this to see the name of it. Oh, the name of it didn't pop up. Let's see why. So if you don't see the name of your game object showing up, click Gizmos. I had Gizmos toggled off. So if I click it again, there it goes, it shows up. And you see how tiny the that name is? Look, it's showing all the names of my other game objects too. And they're all stacked on top of each other, but whatever. So you can go to Gizmos here, and if you select 3D icons, here you can now change the size of them. You see how this camera and this stuff is like getting big and small, but that's how you can manipulate the size of them. But if you turn off 3D icons, it kind of has like a default size, and that's fine for us. That'll work for us. So I'm gonna go back to the Animator. What you want to do now is you want to hit Add Component, and you're gonna add the Animator component, not the animation component, the Animator component. I keep sticking my face forward when I work like this close to the monitor. When I used to draw, I would put my face right up to the paper. An animator usually animates its children. And now what children are is something we might get into later, but basically it's just when you have objects in an object. So as you can see here, if I hit this little triangle, it closes the scene and all the objects are gone because all of the objects are inside the scene. So if we want to move something in the Animator, we just have to drag it into on top of that game object, and now it's inside of that game object. And now check it out. I can open and close it and you can see what's inside there. Now once an object is inside of another one, if I move the Animator, look, it's moving that image. Topmost object moves all of the objects inside it. But if I move the background, it does not move the Animator. See, the Animator stayed in the same spot. Look, I'll put the Animator at 0, 0. Alright, and now I'm going to move this around. See, I moved it, and look at the Animator. It's still at 0, 0. So the parent will affect the children, but the children won't affect the parent. We're going to put all of these objects. You can shift select them all. I'm doing the face thing again. You can shift select them all and move them into the Animator. And now let me just put them in the correct order once again. And now if I go into the Animator, you can turn game objects on and off. Right here next to the name of the game object, you can see there's a little checkbox. If I click this checkbox, all of the image disappeared. Because if you turn off the parent, all of its children also turn off. But if I go here and I just turn off Vandra, you can see now that is the only game object that turned off. If you're in the hierarchy, you can see what game objects are turned off because they turn gray. You see how they're gray over here? Let's start animating. Okay, so if we click the animator, here you can see it doesn't have a controller. So we have to create a controller, or if you've already created one, you can use one. But it's very easy. All you got to do is actually just start animating, and Unity will create a controller for you. I'll show you what I mean. We can go to Window, Animation, and then click on Animation. And here is the animation window. I was wrong. You have to click the Create button and then decide where you want to put that animator. So this is when I would go to Dwarf. I'm assuming we made a folder called Animations. Do you guys see it? Animations at the top. And then here I'm going to call this Start Screen Animation. The cool thing about this is we're just animating the start screen. But dude, you can animate characters, you can animate other stuff. So this is how you animate stuff in Unity. You don't need to animate in you don't need to animate stuff like characters and whatever in Maya or other 3D softwares. You can do it in Unity! How cool is that? So if you exported a character with all the body parts separate, like the hands, the legs, and whatever, you can connect them all together, kind of like I'm doing with the parent object here, the animator, and you would just make these layers be different body parts, and then you can animate the character however you want. So we'll do that later on in the future. This is almost like a super noob intro to that. So we have the animation here, and there's a drop down here where we can create multiple animations. So for example, I have the start screen animation, but I might want to make another one in case you exit the game or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, this right here is a timeline, and you can press the play button and nothing happens, right? You can see nothing's happening. So how you make stuff happen is you create keyframes. And the easiest way to create keyframes, the easiest way to animate stuff in Unity that I found is to just record yourself moving it. So the first thing I'm going to animate is the camera. And since I'm going to animate the camera, I think I'm just going to put it inside the animator as well. And now this time I am going to split my scene and game view, because to see what the camera is seeing, I'm going to have to look at the game view. And then to move objects around, I'm going to have to use the scene view. Let's go ahead and click on the main camera. So with the camera, I'm going to zoom the camera in onto Vandra's face, and I'm just going to use the transform to move it around while I look at the game view. So right about, here, and then let's zoom in a little bit closer. I'm just dragging, and I think about right there, it's a pretty good start. So I'm gonna hit the record now, and that'll be the starting position. Then I'll go to 4 seconds, and we're gonna move the camera down and zoom out. As long as you don't move this location here, you're editing the same keyframe. But as soon as you move this a tiny bit, watch, if I do this, now it'll create new keyframes. So make sure that when you're editing, you're not even a millimeter. You can't even be a tiny bit off of that keyframe if you want to edit it. And just to be sure, you can even delete it before you create a new one, or you can click it, open it up, and edit values right in here. Okay, so now if I play through that, we can see it zooms from Vandra's face to basically a shot of everything. And now I'm gonna just mess with the layers and put the things kind of where I want them to be in regards to when they're gonna animate. So for example, here I have the boomerang. I'll probably put this closer to Dwarf's hand right there. And then the crowd should probably move down a little bit. Yeah, the crowd needs to be closer, somewhere like right there. The turrets need to be right here. There we go. And what else am I missing? Dwarf. I need to rearrange some of these layers and fix the names. Give me 1 sec. Okay, so I fixed my layers a little bit, and let's continue where we left off. So the dwarf looks really kind of stuck to the background there, right? So something that I think we should do is not have the dwarf title come in till way later. So if I click on the title game object, here, one of the properties in the sprite is color. And the color has an alpha. RGB, red, green, blue, and then alpha. And then if we drag the alpha to 0, oh, I need to be recording first. Don't forget to hit the recording button. I'm going to record, then I'm going to select the color, and I'm going to drag the alpha to 0. Now what you can see will happen is that Dwarf will fade out. You see that? But we don't want it to fade out, we want it to fade in. So I'm going to grab the title sprite first keyframe and move it after the invisible one, and now look, it's fading in. So you can drag keyframes around, which is really awesome, because if you try to do like frame by frame animations for a lot of stuff, then it's a lot harder to mess with the timing. This way, within Unity, you know, we can mess with the timing of anything. So I would recommend animating stuff in Unity. What I should do though is also make sure that there's a keyframe at the very beginning. So I'm going to press record and make sure that the alpha is at 0 at the very beginning. Now check that out. That's pretty cool. I think it should also grow, right? So when it starts fading in, right there where it starts fading in, we should start making it grow. So let's press R, and now we can mess with the scale, and I'm gonna shrink it to just, I don't know, maybe a little bit, and then a little further up when it fades in. I think when the camera slows down, stops, I think that's when it should stop growing. Make the title grow pretty big. I think something like that. And now let's hit play and see what that, let's stop recording, hit play and see what that looks like. That's pretty cool. That is fun. Dude, it's gonna look so good when I animate all these other layers. And then the idle is probably gonna make it do this. Like when it's idling, I'll probably make it grow. Or I might make it rock, like a little left and right. Or both. As the camera pans down, I want to give it this like 3D look. And for that, I need to move the layers all at different speeds. So the crowd, I'm going to hit record. And I think the crowd can, actually, I need to not record. I need to move the crowd where I want it to start, which would be where it is. And actually, I'm not gonna move the crowd. I forgot. I did that thing with Vandra in the background. So Vandra needs to move down at about right. I'm gonna make it about right here when Dwarf starts coming in. So I think she needs to move down. Actually, she needs to keep moving down as long as the camera's moving down. And the camera's moving down all the way to the end. So at the very end, let me hit record. And let's move Vandra down. No, up. If I move her down, let me see. I don't even know what that'll look like. Let's see. Yeah, that looks good. That looks good, and it keeps her head in the shot. Basically, the image squishes on itself. It makes it look like the camera's a little bit 3D. I'm loving it. That was a McDonald's unpaid sponsorship. Hey, what's up?
Yeah, my bad.
I think the whole thing is kind of slow. And a cool thing that Unity has, and they upgraded this not too long ago. A cool thing Unity has is that you can select a whole section and you can move it around, right? But you can also squeeze stuff. And check this out. If I select everything and I go to these blue bars on the edge, I can squeeze these keyframes and it tries to keep the same spacing ratio. Yo, how cool is that? I didn't have to move each of them one by one if I wanted to get the same spacing ratio. I hope you know what I'm talking about. I hope that makes sense. But now it goes a little bit faster. I think that's pretty good. It still feels like it takes a really long time for it to get like from here to here. So I do think I'm going to move this even closer. Let's see how that looks. Man, I feel like Dwarf needs to start fading in here, but it's too soon. Maybe what we can do is move the camera down faster than it zooms out. And we could do that with curves. So if we go to the curves and we go to the main camera position and I zoom out here, we can see that the Y position starts off moving slow and then speeds up and slows down, but we don't want that. So I'm going to click this, click that little dot, and then you can already see that it's moving, and the reason it's moving is because it would actually be at this position at this time. So now by doing that, the camera starts moving fast right away. It doesn't slowly build up speed. Let's make this like a crazy water park slide. It'd be like this. You guys ever go down those insane water park slides? I went down Aquatica in Orlando, down the one that's supposed to, that you can the one where the floor pops from under you. And I'm going down really fast, and I used to wear contacts, and I wanted to look, right? The water is splashing so hard. It hurts. That's how hard it's splashing. My back was hurting. And the water is splashing in my face, and I open my eyes, and the water splashes the contact into the back of my eye. And then I got off the water ride, and I was trying to grab my contact lens from my eye, but it was almost so far back, like I couldn't reach it. That was kind of creepy. All right, back to the tutorial. I think I got it looking pretty cool. Check it out. Not bad, right? So I decided to crop Vandra's head off at the end because it just looks cooler for everything to be closer. PJ just sent me updates to the art, so let's put this in and hook it up. Graphical update. Replace the files in the destination. And now watch this. When I click in Unity, I think they'll be updated. Boom. Check it out. Watch Vandra. Ooh. There is this new guy. He wasn't there at all. So we got a completely, we got an extra enemy here. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is add particles to this. So we can right click and we can go to create. And where would a particle system be? Oh, you know what? It's not a default thing that you can build. I think you just have to create an empty game object. And then on that empty game object, and look, it's at some random position. Remember, it's wherever your scene view is. So let's just make this like 0, 0, 0. And we're going to add the particle system component. Hey, what's up?
Dude, let me see it.
I'm about to add the particles. I almost want you to see it after I add the particles.
All right, later. I see. Bye.
All right, peace. Okay, so add a particle system. And so a particle system, you can see it getting simulated inside the scene. So go ahead and find it in your scene. And since we want this to be near Vandra, I'm just going to actually move it up near Vandra. Here it has a pause, restart, and stop. These are the controls for your particle system. So I'm just going to go ahead and click stop. We don't need to control the particle system right now. Actually, no. We should just let it run. We should constantly let it run so that we can see all the stuff as we update it. So for particle system, you can pick a sprite. And this is probably what we should do. I'm going to make myself disappear real quick. So inside the particle system, make sure you have it opened up. Over here, you have a bunch of check boxes, and it'll show you how things are, in whatever, you decide what gets turned on and off. This purple color right here, there's like memes about this purple color, because this purple color means that you're missing something. It means that there's a missing texture. And the reason they do it that way is because in 3D games, if something's this color and not like a default white color or something, it's really obvious that someone forgot to put a texture in there, and it makes the 3D modelers like really aware of how they messed up on the 3D models. There's too much information, but anyway, that color, there's significance to it, and now you know the memes, and now you're cool. Now you know one of the game dev jokes. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to material, and I think we're going to pick the sprite material I already have in here. Unity comes with a default sprite material, so don't be like, dude, what, you have a sprite material? I don't have that. And now look, they're all white, right? And we can go over here and change the color to whatever we want. So since we can change the color of that, we're going to change it to, we're going to use the color picker, and we're going to change it to Vandra's magic. And I'm going to pick the lightest color, and maybe I'm going to go even lighter than that. I think I'm going to go even lighter, just a little bit lighter, so that way you can really see it. And if I drag the particle system over these images, you can't see it anymore, right? Look, you can't see it, and that has to do with the rendering. Things get rendered on top of each other. So these images, if I turn off the animator, oh, never mind, the camera's in the animator, that's why that broke. I turned off the camera. If you turn off the camera, you don't see anything. You always have to have a camera in a scene. Let's rename this to actually particle system, or particles, Vandra particles, or particles Vandra. I like that. The reason I like naming it backwards like that is because when I'm searching here, I'm not going to be searching for Vandra, I'm going to be searching for particles, and then I can see all the particles in the entire game and who they belong to. So that's why I would name it like Yoda talking backwards kind of thing. Now let's get to the renderer. So if you scroll down here to the renderer in the particle system, I think it has a sorting layer here somewhere. Let's look at that. Do you see it? Order in layer. There it is. Okay, God, there's so many things to read. You got to choose the UI sorting layer, because remember, all of these, they're on the UI sorting layer. So this one's 8, and then the title is 10. So if we want this particle effect to be behind the title, which we do, then go down to the sorting layer here and put 9. And now it should be behind the title. And let's hit play and we'll see if it is. And there it is. There's the particle effect. It's pretty hideous, but it's there and it's behind the title just like we want. And I know you are already hella excited for all the particles that you can add to your start screen. Super quick tip: if you edit the particle system while the game is running, if you move stuff, if you change stuff in the inspector while the game is running, when you stop running the game, it goes back to what it was before. So if you like the settings that you have, what you need to do is you need to click on the component and hit copy component. And now if I click in there and click paste component values, it's back to what I had it. What do you think of these particle effects? Which ones are good, which ones are bad? Should any of them change? Do you like the green ones back there?
Oh, I love that.
And then do you like the arms glowing?
That's cool.
And do you see, if you look at the arm, do you see there's like this, like almost like a magic going around the arms?
Oh, yeah, that's sick.
So if you play the animator, you're not going to see the particle effect. So if you're like, man, why aren't my particle effects showing up? What you have to do is you have to either look in the scene view and you'll see the particle effects. No, you won't. You have to press play in order to see what your particle effects would actually look like when you're running the game. I'm adding the glow to the shock tower right now as a particle effect. It's gonna be sick. All right, well, let's see what that looks like. I pressed play and here we go. Oh, that's a little too flashy. I think I made it a little too big and a little too bright. Check out this cool shock particle effect I did for that tower. Isn't it dope? Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to have an idle animation. And now for an idle animation, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new animation. And this is after the start screen. Hold on, let me move this. This is the view. after the start screen animates in, we want everything to keep moving. We want it to idle. So let me go ahead and show you how to make a second animation and make a transition to that animation. So copy paste all of the keyframes at the very end, and then go to create new clip, idle animation. All right, and I'm gonna paste. You're gonna want to copy paste the exact same frames. So now if I hit play, nothing's happening, right? Go ahead and animate a few things. So the animator window can be kind of intimidating, and you can move around it by clicking the middle scroll wheel and dragging. You can move these things around, and I'm going to be very quick with it. Entry is where the animation first starts. So it goes to the start screen animation. You remember we named it start screen animation? And then we made this animation just now, the start screen idle animation. Here, if I switch tabs back to the animations and click the drop down menu, we can see the two animations that we have here for the animator in our animator in the hierarchy has two animations in it inside of the controller. And here we're inside the animator controller and we're going to be controlling it. So after the start screen, what we want is we're going to right click and click make transition, and you can pull an arrow out now, and we're going to pull it to start idle animation. And now if I click on the idle animation here, it shows us information about it in the inspector. You see how we can see information about things we click on in the inspector. So if I go to the start screen animation, I can see that it's this, I clicked it right here. I can see that it's this animation. It showed it to me in my project. Watch, I'll click it again. It showed it to me in my project, and if I click it in my project, we can see here that it's set to loop. But this time, we do want the idle to loop. We want the idle animation to keep looping until the player presses start. So let's see if that works. And there we go, it came in, and now it's idling. Isn't that awesome? And we're gonna make a whole bunch of stuff idle here. Dwarf will float a little bit, and the text is going to, oh look, the text is animating. it faded a little bit. It fades in and out. I'll fix that. It's not supposed to fade in and out. But yeah, let's go. I'll animate a bunch of this stuff and then I'll show it to you. Whoa, so I found out why the title was disappearing, and it's so dumb. If you look at the value here, it's 1. And then it changes, and then it goes back to 1. So why didn't it just stay 1 the whole time? You know why? Because Unity automatically applied the curves. And even though you can barely see it there, there's a curve there. So I'm going to select both of them and click flat. Now if I go to the drop sheet and I scroll across here, we can see that it'll stay 1 the whole time. So be careful with curves. Curves do change the value of things. And remember that Unity will automatically add curves to things to smooth them for you. I noticed something, and I'm going to show you how to fix it. Watch the helmet on the skeleton. Did you see how it just came down real quick? So basically the problem is that the helmet starts at the bottom when in reality it should start at the top. So I went to the start screen animation and I copied the keyframes from the very end, and then I'm going to the idle animation, and here for the helmet I'm going to delete these positions, and I'm going to paste. Let me see if this works. And I'm gonna paste the helmet position. There we go. So now the helmet is at the top. Here in the middle it needs to come down, and at the very end we're going to also copy paste the helmet position near the top. So I had it the opposite that it should have been. So now the helmet's at the top the whole time, here somewhere near in the middle. Remember, press the record button, and now let's move the helmet somewhere like over here, right above the head. And let's hit play and see what that looks like. And that looks pretty good. It's nice and smooth. Now one more thing I want to show you is transitions. So if you go to Window, Animation, and click Animator, this window right here will pop up for you. Remember, you can click the middle scroll wheel to move around and zoom in and out, and here we can see the two animations that we have, and the arrow in between. When you click that arrow in between the two animations, in the inspector, it'll show you how the animation transitions from one to the other. And here, if we scrub through this, we can see the transition, and we can even hit play here and see how it transitions from one to the other to see if it's smooth. I don't think we need a big transition time here, since I already designed the transition to basically start where one ends. Okay, so I'm gonna press R, and I added some code so that when I press R, it restarts the scene. That way I don't have to keep pressing play and unplay, play and unplay. And I don't know if you noticed, but the helmet now transitions much nicer. It doesn't jump. I think we're done. I hope your start screen looks just as awesome. I taught way more in this video than I was planning to, so I hope you appreciate the effort. It's a long video. Thumbs it up. I'll see you guys next week. Dev Life.